Well, welcome to the Dream Labs. Dr. Contrast here, live. I just thought we'd take a quick minute here, and those of us joining us today on the stream, we've spent the last two lessons, so to speak, going back a couple of weeks ago, dealing with one-point perspective. I'm just going to take each module along the way, or each stream along the way, and begin to describe some things that we can kind of utilize for our drawing skills and talents to kind of put them into practice. So today I'm going to begin a lesson on two-point perspective, and just before I begin, I want to make sure that the real goal here for everybody, including myself, is not to be caught up with when I show you, for example, all the structural material that goes in behind putting a sketch together. All these elements are, lesson 1 and 2, are building blocks to build success. And the reason I'm stating that is because I really believe with all my heart that the more we understand how perspective works, you can see all the mechanics of it, like leading edges and facing planes and drive lines and all these things that build it, and inside cut lines, and how to see all those things come together. The more we practice those skill levels, the more we're going to see, for example, how our sketch rendering skills and just basic drawing skills by visualizing things are really going to become much, much stronger and far more efficient for us. So I just want to begin today very briefly here, going back about to last week. We wrapped up that session in one-point perspective, going through some things showing, for example, how to build a shape or form using the structural side of the one-point perspective system. And I did two key things here. I want to really start with this sketch. Two things I want to stress here today. This is where we've been in one-point perspective, and this is where we're moving in a two-point perspective. But I want to make sure before we start today's stream on two-point perspective, which is this operation here, that we get one very good solid point, one principle really established, and that is, how do we know it's a one-point perspective? What are we looking for? The key to it all is understanding that that facing plane right there in red, that the face of that cube that we're developing or building, literally remains parallel to my eyes. Notice the ground line is down here. If I draw a line, a simulated ground line down here, that tells me that's ground. Now, up and through here, that tells me that this sketch I'm going to do at the beginning of this drawing is going to be a one-point perspective, because that facing plane has remained parallel to my eyes and on the ground plane. So that's one distinction about when you're looking, for example, at a sketch or an illustration or a photograph. Look at where that element sits. If the object sits and you're looking at it, it's parallel to your eyes, then you know it's one-point perspective. So that's a big distinction there that we didn't cover last week, and I want to start with that today. In that the whole idea is to go back in and look at this thing from the point of view that one-point perspective, by definition, is the object or the objects you're looking at remain parallel to our eyes. And that's the clue right there. That shape or that facing plane, or no matter what the object is parallel to us, and it remains parallel to ground or to our eyes as we look at it. Now, second phase here, we go into today's lesson. When you go to a two-point perspective, things happen. It's a subtle change. By definition, two-point perspective is simply this: when the object or the objects we're looking at changes or is at an angle to our eyes. In other words, we've just taken that cube and just rotated it, and now we've got, instead of a facing plane, we've now got a leading edge. That line there is very symbolic, because what that tells us, it's labeled as a leading edge because it leads us into space, it leads us into the sketch, it creates depth. So again, the difference is 1 point, parallel; 2 point, when the objects we're looking at are at an angle to our eyes. So everything moves. Now notice, look at this. Here's the ground line. How can you tell, for example, when you look at something in a two-point perspective? Simply look at where it's oriented on the page, or when you're drawing or working or looking at a photograph. It's simply this. Here's my ground line now. And notice, it's no longer parallel like the 1 point. Now there's an angle here, and an angle here. That whole object has been rotated. So once again, those are the two subtle distinctions that make a huge difference in learning how to see how space functions, and how to operate with it, and how to put it all into practice. So without any delay here, I'm going to go back in, and now that we've got that set aside, let's come back in and do the following here. Let's get rid of this guy, and I've prepared a couple little pieces ahead of time here to go back in and work with. So we're going to start by showing you how to build a two-point perspective in the same format that we did last Monday in one-point perspective. I started a little sketch here to kind of give it a little head start on this thing. When we go with two-point perspective again, notice, hey, how are you, Blissik? How are you? Nice to see you. Hey, I'm glad you made it too. Everything okay? You have a good day thus far? I'll just hang on here. Great. Above all else, Melissa, it's nice to have you on board here, and I hope you didn't, if you missed that first introduction, I'll go back and review it here very quickly here for you. But we're going to start today's stream on lesson 3, which is getting into two-point perspective. A little bit of a different animal than we were last week with 1-point perspective. Let me bring this back here just to make sure that you understand where we're starting with here. I began the stream with this simple principle, Ballistic, that doing well, work has started hard, my time has become very limited. Yeah, okay, very good. I'll do as best I can here. Last week, we talked about 1-point perspective, how to build it with a facing plane. And how do you know when you look at something that's either in 1-point or 2-point perspective? Always look for that facing plane. Notice it's parallel to my eyes by definition. We mentioned last week that in 1-point perspective, by definition, it's when the object or the objects we're looking at are parallel to our eyes. So that facing plane is parallel to my eyes. It also sits on the ground plane, and that remains parallel as well. Notice what happens when you go to 2-point perspective. Hey, OD operator, just subscribed. Hi, OD, how are you? It's good to see you on board here. Notice when you go to 2-point perspective, thank you for the subscription. I really appreciate it. Let's go back in here and look at 2-point perspective. 2-point perspective, by definition, is simply this. The object or the object you're looking at have been changed, or it's at an angle to your eyes. Again, 2-point perspective, when the object or the objects you're looking at is at an angle to your eyes. Notice parallel. Now notice down here, I've just taken that cube and rotated it, and I've got a leading edge now. That's a really significant comment to make, because that whole system here, when you go into the idea of having that leading edge, it's called that because it leads you into space. It begins to develop depth in the sketch that you're working with. Now notice again the subtle difference here. Now parallel, ground line, parallel, ground line, and look at the angle here. This is now how you can tell it's 2-point. There's an angle here and an angle here, which now tells you that this object now is going to be going into 2-point perspective. So with that little preamble, sorry for the delay here and the repetition, but I want to make sure you're all catching up here with where I started. Now we move to this. I'm going to go show you a little exercise on how it all works in 2-point perspective, and we'll go through a building block here, and I'm going to demonstrate how it all begins to come together. Now, before I begin, I do not want you to be intimidated by this stuff at all. We're going through the mechanics of the whole process to do one thing, and the whole goal for these lessons is the following. The whole goal is to teach our eyeballs and our hand-eye coordination skills to develop at will good freehand sketches without the mechanics getting in the way of the aesthetics. That's why this stuff is being done. So let me just explain to you what's going on here in this sketch. Notice we've got a horizon line. We have a vanishing point right and a vanishing point left, because now we moved the object and rotated it. We now have a leading edge, which is here. We also have a measuring line, which I'll show you in a moment how that begins to function to develop a real good visual cube, an accurate visual cube. And then once that's done, we're going to use the same process last week when we work with that inside cut line. We're going to go back to this nearest angle on the ground, which is in blue here, and we're going to bisect it, and we're going to trisect it, take that first line right back up to horizon line, and that's going to develop a special vanishing point. Everything else is all academic. Once that intersection is found, we're going to drive that through and get the other side of the plane, the other side of the cube in place, and begin to build the cube. So a lot of conversation there. You'll see it come together here in a moment when I kind of demonstrate the sketch. And there's one thing I really want to stress too. Notice this. I've been working with architects for a long period of time and interior space guys, and I do a lot of sketch rendering and illustration work for these firms. Always interesting to me. I ask this question when I go through a demonstration with these corporations or firms. Does 2-point perspective have a central vanishing point? And you would not believe the response I get, guys. They all go, no, because it's 2-point perspective. Totally false. Hear me well. 2-point perspective does have a central vanishing point. And how do you find it? By taking that leading edge and running it right straight up until it intersects horizon line. It's going to be really critical. I'll show you why in a moment here. You take that line and you extend it up right to horizon line, and you find that point of reference. That now becomes my central vanishing point, which is another way of saying this is now where I'm standing. I'm looking at that object from right there, looking right into it, and my eyes are on that horizon line right there at that central vanishing point. That's where my eyes are. So everybody, so far so good? Am I communicating all right? Or am I going too quickly? I'll pause here for a moment. Everything good? I hope so. It's pretty quiet. Let me know if I can go ahead here, gang. All right, let's move along here. Now, I'm prepared ahead of time, a little sketch here. Notice I've already established a horizon line. Let's lay that in. I'm going to sketch that through. Next thing I'm going to do is come right back and turn this thing on the horizontal here and develop a straight line and take it right up. So it intersects. I'm going to pick a height. I'm going to go from there to there. That's going to be the height of my leading edge. I'm going to break this in just a little bit. I'll go a little bit tougher with this guy. I'm going to heavy that up. That from there to there is my leading edge. This now is becoming critical. That is now my central vanishing point. Let me label that CVP. There it is. There's my central vanishing point. That's where I'm standing. Next step, I'm going to take this. I'm going to take this in. I'm going to build the cube. Switch to blue pen. I want to put that red line in there to let you know that that's where that leading edge is, where we're actually seeing the shape break into space. Now I'm going to rotate the page. See it, strike it, get that line in. Now I'm going to start developing drive lines here. This to this, to this. And then from there, all the way through to that VP. And then from here to that VP. Let me stop here just for a moment. Let me tell you, folks, if you feel like the freehand side, again, all these lengths become a difficulty, take a straight edge or a ruler out or a triangle and just develop those lines. These become frames. These are now drive lines. That's noted here, drive lines. They're called a drive line because they drive you back in space and create depth. So now let's do this. Let's come back to a red pen. Let's come back down here. Now this is our nearest angle. Let's put this in blue. This angle down here on the ground line. That's my nearest angle to me on the ground plane, right there. I'm going to take that same system. I'll switch to red pen here for a moment. I'm going to bisect that line by doing this. There it is at 45 degrees. 45 right there. That's 40. I'm going to bisect it. This is, again, the same system we worked with last week in one-point perspective. It works both ways, but a little bit of phenomenon changes here, and it's not difficult to operate with. So here, bear with me here. So now I'm going to take that 45 and its remaining angle, I'm going to trisect it. I'm going to go 1 and 2. Take that first line right there and drive it right back to horizon line. Interesting thing though, that point of reference now becomes my, for those of you working with last week, my special vanishing point. It's going to be special because it's going to help us build some more things as we go down the line here with each sketch. All set? Now, what I do is take this and come out here and develop down on the ground line here, and develop a line that comes out like this. And I pick a point of reference and make sure I'm building a cube. All four sides are going to be equal. So I'm going to take that sheet of paper, just for benefit here for you. Take that same height, bring it out here and get it right to there. There's that same height. Now, here's how I'm going to start this whole plan. I'm going to find the right-hand side of the face of this cube, and I'm going to do it like this. I'm going to take that point right there and drive it right back to central vanishing point. Right like that. There it is, right there. That really is paramount. Excellent. So far, so good, gang. Measuring line. From that measuring line to that same height, or the same height, the same length, take that line right back to SV, to central vanishing point, and where it intersects the ground plane right there. Take that point and run it straight up. Now, let me just ink that in very briefly here. And there it is right there. That whole line, that whole face right there, I've just now developed the right-hand side of this cube. So far, so good, gang? So far, so good. Excellent. All right, here we go. Now, from that corner, now I'm going to build the floor. And from that corner, I'm going to take that point right there and run it right through to this. Like so. Great. All set? Now I'm now bringing the drive lines on the floor. This, and this. That triangle is on the ground. Now I'm going to take that intersection right there and come right back through and draw right through the cube. Take that line to vanishing point left and draw that right through. And very quickly, just like that, where that intersects, I'm going to take that point and bring it right on up. Now I'm just done. Here's the right-hand side I started with. Now I've just developed the left-hand side. Now my question to you, as you're watching this, please feel free to be very, very forthright and above all honest. I do not want to deceive you at all. I want to make sure I'm communicating clearly. Does this now begin to look like it's beginning to develop a freehand cube very accurately? Does it look like a cube? And the answer is yes. Because the math does not, the visual side of it, it's mathematical and aesthetic, as we said last week, but it all works together to create truth. Now let's take this upper piece right here, and I'm going to come back over here and take that point right back to vanishing point left. Take this point right here, back to vanishing point right, and run that through very quickly. Where that intersects with that top, take that right down, and lo and behold, let me beef this up. Look at this. Let me beef this up, as long as if it were a glass cube, which is really what I want to develop here. Look at that. Let me stop right there for a moment. Is that or is that not a visually accurate cube using freehand? And once again, I want to make sure that everything's nice and clear, that I'm not going too quickly, and we're beginning to see how this whole thing begins to function. Are we good here, gang? Let me know and I'll move on here. Before I move on to a review here, just for a bit, again, we established the leading edge, took it right through, developed the SV, the central vanishing point where I'm standing. Now I came back out here, drew the measuring line down, took that height, made sure it was the same down here, took that point right back to central vanishing point, where it intersected on the ground plane right there, drew that up, and I just created that, in this case, the very left-hand side of that cube. Terrific, there it was. Once I have that, I've got this point of reference. I'm going to take that line right back to vanishing point left, where it intersects the ground here, or the SVP line, run that right through, and I just created the floor. The floor of this cube is right here. I run that straight up, then I start to connect the dots. Up, back to the left, to the right, pardon me. This corner, back to the left. Where they intersect, that's my back corner. I drop that right down into the shape, and there it is. There's my cube. Very quickly and very efficiently described. All set, gang? Looking good? Now we've got that done. Now I want to be very careful at this stage again. Let me slow down the process here just for a moment. Today's stream is going to be extremely methodical, and I'm going to be very, very clued into being very cautious and very fundamentally sound from step to step to step. We're not going to do a lot of sketches today. We're going to do a lot of fundamental stuff to make sure that we understand how the system works. Once that begins to establish itself, we're going to come in next week and start using two-point perspective to show you how to develop shape and form. We'll start doing more sketch rendering next week. I want to make sure this one is really cemented and understood from the point of view of being extremely clear so you can work with it and have fun with this. And again, that's the intent. Two intentions. Number one, to make sure that all these things that we're working with, all the elements of vanishing points, central vanishing points, special vanishing points, horizon line, inside cut line, all this geometry or all the mechanics begin to help us become much more aesthetic. We can freehand sketch work because we have confidence now how to see things and how to build things properly and without lying to us and without being deceived. It's truthful. Secondly, as a result of all that, when I go through exercises, for example, when I do automobile, any illustration work, cars, product, interior space, you name it, architecture, I'm always thinking about structure. I don't draw the object, as I said last couple of weeks. I'm drawing the structure in which it builds in. Every car I've done, I've always carved it out of that block. So that's what we're building towards here, folks. So let's put this aside and let's go through a couple more exercises here. And I'll come back to this in a moment. And let me stop there. Let me give myself about a good 5-minute pause. Any questions so far, gentlemen? Am I communicating all right? Please let me know. All right, we're going to keep going. So far, so good. All right, thanks, Ballistics. Looking good. Let's go back and do a couple more exercises here to show the whole thing begins to operate here. Let's go back in and do the following. The first thing I'm going to do is pick a point of reference. I'm going to pick this point first. I'm going to set up here and begin to develop that little location. It's going to be my vanishing point left. All set. And this one over here, I'm going to take that point of reference. Vanishing point right. Those two elements, notice I've stretched them out quite a bit. I put a lot of span in here because I don't want that cube. If I bring these vanishing points in, that cube is going to be extremely collapsed, and it just really don't. It'll distort the image, so to speak. Let's put it that way. So let's go back in through here. Let's establish a vertical. Let's do it this way. Let's put that vertical in place. Excellent. Now let's pick a height. I want that height right there, there to there. Now notice, as we said before, where's my central vanishing point? My central vanishing point is now going to be right here. That's where I'm standing. And that's where my eyes are. That central vanishing point is going to be critical for us. Once I have that in place, let's do this. I'm going to come down here on the measuring line, draw a line parallel, and this measuring line now becomes parallel to the horizon line. I'm going to use this to develop how it begins to operate. So, you ready? I'm going to take this height right here, and let's be honest with this. If we need to work with this, terrific. Let's get this height right here, laid out, and then bring it right down on the ground line and get that point of reference right there. Once I have that point right there, gentlemen, take that line and take it right back to CVP. There it is. Now, let's come back in and bring the frames. Let's do this. Let's build this. Let's build this. Frame right. Drive line. Drive line. Again, drive line. And again, drive line. Notice how I'm just kind of framing that perspective in so quickly. Very quickly, simple. All set, gang? Now notice, there's my intersection I'm looking for right there. That height that height and that same distance on the ground plane on my measuring line, from that point of reference right back to central vanishing point. That intersection is critical. I'm going to rotate the paper here, and I'm going to do this. I have now, let me beef this up just a bit. That line to that line to that line. Excellent. I've just now created the right-hand side of that cube in two-point perspective. Now I'm going to build the left-hand side. I'm going to take this corner right here and draw it right back to vanishing point right there. There it is. Now I'm going to come back to my red pen. Let's do this first. Here's my angle on the ground line here. That's my angle nearest to me on the ground line right here. Now I'm going to take the red pen. I'm going to bisect it first at 45 degrees. Then I'm going to trisect it. 1, 2. Take that first line, pardon me as I turn it upside down, right back to the horizon line. That reference right there is critical. That now has become, let's label this my central vanishing point. That point right there, let's ink that in a little bit so it's bolder. That now becomes my special vanishing point. And you'll see why that, again, why that special vanishing point is so critical when I begin to build or go back in space or put pieces together here as we develop these shapes. All set, gang? So far, there we go. Now, let's come back down the ground plane. I've taken that line to get the measuring, the left-hand side, SVP to get that point right there on the ground. Now I'm going to build the box, the cube, the base of the cube. I'm going to take that point reference from the left-hand side, run it right through till it hits over here. There's my ground line right there. Now, once that happens, beautiful. I take that point reference and bring it right straight up, and lo and behold, let me just kind of beef that up. Let's get the floor in place here. There it is. And there it is. And again, there's the left-hand face, and here is the left-hand face, right-hand face. So far, so good, gang? Excellent. Let's go back now. Let's take this thing. Let's take this point and run it right back to the left. Draw through it. Take that point, run it right back to the right. And where those 2 points intersect, right there, drop a line in. And look at that. There it is there. And there it is there. Now I've just created a 2-point cube. Notice, a lot of floor, very little upper, very little top. Why? Because you're moving closer to the eye level. The closer this measure line, closer it gets to eye level, the less you're going to see of the floor, and the more you're going to see of the upper. And we'll go through some exercises next week on that little element as well. So once again, now let's take that same process and say that we did something last week I think is pretty critical. How about, let's say I want to build one back. I want to take it, let's say this is 0, and this is 10 feet. And this now is 10 feet back. That's, again, the cube. Now, say I want to go back 20 feet. How do I go back to that second place again? Again, same thing we did here. I'm going to take this point right here. This is now my nearest angle to me. I'm going to take that line right there, rotate the paper, that corner, right back to SVP. Switch pens, where it hits that ground line right there, do the same thing again. I'm going to come right back in, draw right through that. And where it intersects over here, on this ground plane right there, look at this. There it is there, and there it is there. That point right there is now 20 feet back. All works together. There we go. Now I'm going to take this line, let's kind of beat this up. There's the second cube. There's the second cube in the upper. Let's draw that through. And then there's the other one coming through it. There it is there. And here's the top. It's that to that. Now, as Nebo said last week, it was kind of an interesting observation, and all of you said the same thing. The more I take this surface back, the less and less it's going to, the more it's going to diminish. Wider, less, 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 because I keep going back in space an additional 10 feet. I hope this is making sense here, gang. So once again, let me just make sure that we're in good shape here. This is now my horizon line here. Vanishing point left, vanishing point right. Here's my SVP, which I got by bisecting on the ground angle here. Bisect it first 15 degrees, run that right through onto the ground. Take that line right through, got that side in place, brought that up, and then I just crossed over and got the back side of the cube as well as the front side of the cube by developing that whole process here. Very interesting. Again, central vanishing point, and this now becomes mine. I'll just label it like so, ML. That's now my measuring line. That height right there, that height of the cube, there to there, that 10 feet, has to equal that 10 feet because 0 to 10, I'm developing the face of a cube. So that's how that begins to function here, gang. Really interesting how that whole process really does settle in. Now let's go back and do another exercise here. So far, let me stop again just before I begin and ask the question. Is this making sense for you here, guys? So far, so good? Feel free. If there's any questions you have, don't be embarrassed to ask questions. There's a lot of ground being covered here. And again, as I said in the beginning of my stream today, we're not going to do a lot of sketches. A two-point perspective is a little bit more sensitive. It takes a little bit more seeing and sight discipline. So I'm going to slow it all down to make sure we understand how things are going here so that you don't get confused. I do not want to be guilty of confusing you. I want to be really guilty of inspiring you. That's the difference. All right, let's give it another shot here. Let's create a horizon line. Draw that through. That's already set. There it is. I'm going to pick a point here. That's now going to be my vanishing point left. I'm going to pick a point of reference here. Vanishing point right. I've already got the span out there. Now I'm going to do a little. After I finish the sketch, I'm going to show you what happens when you bring those horizon or those vanishing points in on the horizon line. How it really distorts things. It's absolutely horrible. When I draw something, for example, I like to draw large. When I draw something, I just visualize where the VPs are, and I just stretch them right out to the edge of the paper. So I've got a lot of span to work with, and it really improves the accuracy, and it keeps it nice and clean. So let's do this. Let's establish. Let's get this line in place. There it is there. I'm going to pick a height. This now, that point right there, let me beef that up a bit, is now going to be my leading edge. There it is right there, which is in this case, this has been my leading edge as well. There's my leading edge in this guy. Leading edge in red, leading edge in red. Now I'm going to come back in here. Notice I'm going to extend that up. This point right here is now going to be known as my central vanishing point. That's now where I'm standing, right there. Right. I'm just getting ready to create this cube, or this complex. Now I'm going to bring this line out here. Just draw it parallel to the horizon line. Take that same height. And let's do this first. Let's get that height right there. And then run that right out to right there. That must be equal. We're going to develop this cube. So now that I've got that in place, let's just kind of take that measuring line and run it right back. Let's do this first. Pardon me. I'm sorry. Let's get the frames in. Drive line. Drive line. And again, drive line. And again, drive line. You have a little bit of a difficult time getting those long lengths to kind of move in for you. I've always used a little teaching system that really works well. I've always stated, like in consulting work or workshops or whatever, see it, strike it. See it, strike it. Makes a huge difference. It's training your eyes to begin to see where the rhythm of the line is. So it's going to see it, strike it. See it, strike it. And notice it's one motion. I never get to the place where I'm doing this. If you scribble into it, that destroys the entire geometry of the frames you're working with, and the distortion comes in very rapidly. So now that I've got that point, let's go back to this. Leading edge, measuring line, from that point right back to central vanishing point. Very lightly. Intersection on the ground plane. Now I'm in the process of building the left-hand side of the cube. I'm going to come back in through here, run that vertically, and let's beat this up. It's that, to that, to that. That is now the left-hand side of the cube. Done, just like that, very quickly. Now, from that point of reference, let's take that corner right back to vanishing point, right. Let's run that through. Now I've got the floor. I've started to build the floor first. Everything I've done, for example, in the last 2 weeks, ever since I've been on Twitch, I work from the ground on up. I just build it from the ground so I know where the accuracy is. All right, so let's go back to this. I'm going to use the inside cut line. Here now is my closest, nearest angle on the ground plane, right there. That is my nearest angle, right here. I'm going to take the red pen. I'm going to bisect that angle visually, right, with a red. I'm going to come back in and go 15, 30, 45. I'm going to take that first line and take it right back to horizon line. That intersection right there, gentlemen, has just now established my special vanishing point. It'll be a huge assist to help me get all squared away and begin to build this process here. Very interesting. So far, so good? Now that I've got that point right there, let's kind of beef it up on the ground plane. Now that I have that, I'm going to take that point from vanishing point left and run it right through. See it, strike it. Intersection on the ground plane again over here. Now I'm going to start to build the right-hand side. I'm going to take that line and bring it right up. Pardon me as I kind of do this. There it is. Let's beef it in. That's that and that and that. There's the left-hand side. There's the right-hand side. Now let's go back to this and go back here. Crossover. Up to the left. Take that point back to the right. Where they intersect, there, drop it right down. Look how it all falls into place. There's the ground, there's the top, and you've just created a 2-point cube by utilizing all the elements we've been dealing with for the last 2-3 weeks. And you've been extremely wonderful here. I really appreciate your patience with me and your diligence. This is really going to pay off for all of us in the long run. I'm looking forward to seeing your sketches and as you send them in, as you go with this thing. Really terrific. So nicely done here, gang. Now let's go. Let's build back in space, but use another method we talked about last week. Let's do this. I'm going to come back in and take this face right here, this left-hand side, and I'm going to find the perspective center. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. There's my perspective center right there. Let's kind of do this. Put a little circle in here. Here's my perspective center. I'm going to take that point right there and draw it right back to vanishing point left. Now I'm going to come back. I'm going to build a cube behind it by doing the following. I'm going to come in here and do the following. From that corner there, I'm going to come right through to that point right there and just draw a line. Draw through it. Where it intersects up on top, guess what? That's my second cube. Terrific. Really simple. One way using the SVP, the other one using the facing plane or the planes to bisect them and take it all back. I prefer this method because it's a lot quicker. But there's another method here to do this, and this is one of them. So you take that point of reference, now that you've got that corner, draw it back in space, back to VP right in this case, the top, back to VP right, run that through, intersection, down to ground, and there's my second cube right there. How cool is that? All set, gang? Same thing again. Let's come back down to this corner. Now that I've got that rhythm started, this line is really critical right here. That guy, let's do this. In red, that splits the face of that cube right there. That's going to split it. That gives me 1/2, 1/2. Now, when I find the diagonals, there's my center line. I'm going to take that point and just from this corner to that corner, draw through it, get that intersection. Now I'm going to come to this corner and do the following. I'll come right back in again to where that line is right there and draw through again by doing this. Where it intersects, drop it down. Lo and behold, let's say this is 0, 8 feet. That's 8 feet back. This is now 8 feet here. This is now 16 feet. This is now 24 feet back. There we are. Equal, equal, equal. 24 feet. There we are. So let's take that point of reference right back to vanishing point right. Draw that through. Here it is on the ground plane. Take that point back where it intersects on top. Notice, draw through it. Stop there. Get that. Beef that up. That and that. Now, let me stop right here for a moment. I want to stress something here that's extremely necessary to discuss. There's an awful lot of lines going through here. There's an awful lot of geometry being in place. Why? When I utilize that, what I see in this is learning to see things accurately. I've always believed this with all my heart. Sight is a faculty. We can see, it's a faculty. But to truly see is an art form. This method teaches us how to really see. It almost teaches us a third dimension in sight. So we got to see things in terms of being in the third dimension. Your building fabrication, and it just maintains itself, and a real sense of great accuracy as you go through it. That's why all these lines begin to really help us how to really truly see, and to see well, and to make decisions. That's another thing I think is really critical about this whole process, and just basic drawing. 2-point perspective, 1-point perspective, no matter what your subject matter is, the thing that's great about this whole process, you do not fear making decisions. For this reason. This geometry and the sketch rendering skills we're going to show you later on in each one of these lessons begin to teach you a confidence that is undeniable. You cannot debate the truth. That's what this is. This is truthful. These are truthful principles. I didn't establish them. They've been here since the beginning of time, but people ignore it. They just want to guess at it. And I've said this before, and I really believe this, I sincerely believe this. I'd rather know where I am as opposed to guessing where I'm going. Too many people in this business guess about, well, I think it looks right. The problem there is you think. I'd rather know. This tells me I know that I'm accurate. I've done some workshops. I've watched some people work, for example, and I'm not being critical of those individuals. I'm just making an observation. I've heard people make the comment like, trust me, this will work. Trust me, this will work. When anybody tells me to trust me, this will work, believe me, in my heart of hearts, that tells me it's not working. You don't have to say, trust me, it works. Show me that it works. Tell me why it works. And then all of a sudden, the whole complexion changes. Your whole attitude, your inspiration and your methodologies change because you know where you're going with this stuff. So let's kind of take this thing one more step. Let's say I want to build one up on top. Let's add one more cube on this third cube here. Let's take this backside line, bring it up. Bring this other line, bring it up, and take the backside line through here. This front line, and bring that on up. Let's do this. Let's be very methodical. Take that height right there and say, okay, I'm going to come back here. There's my height. Bring that up and stop at point right there. Equal, equal. Now we'll come back up in here and do the following. All right, now the drive lines. Through and through. All set? Now, from this corner, back to the left. That corner, back to the right. You're overlapping, bringing them through, intersection, dropping it right down. There it is. There it is, right there. Look how simple that is, gang. One on top of the other. You just created 1, 2, 3, 4 boxes using this geometry to work for you here. Let's see. A little bit of madness. Hey, how you doing? Do you think, though, I read the learning perspective can ruin the creative mind once you put the mind in the box? That's a great question, Madness. I don't think it does. I think individuals who are using that as a platform to kind of discuss certain things are bypassing the fact that the perspective does not ruin the creative process. It opens it up. Because once you understand it, you can really begin to cheat with it and begin to flatter it. But if you don't understand it and you're kind of limiting yourself to just freewheeling it and hoping that it all works is extremely dangerous. So I hope I'm not offending you by stating the fact that I don't believe that with all my heart. I think learning perspective can open up your creativity. It begins to tell you can begin to cheat certain things and flatter certain things. I don't mean cheat in the sense that it's false, but begin to flatter something. When I do an automobile design, for example, if there's a lot of really organic shapes, I can flatter that shape by understanding the perspective and how it works. I can take advantage of that. And I'll go back to what Sid Mead said about perspective, and I think he's absolutely correct. Sid Mead's comment was extremely, really, really well mentioned about the fact, so yeah, let me read that for a moment here. Picasso mentioned that he was jealous of the way a child saw the world and how he drew it. Yeah, I think that's a great point because there's no inhibition there. You express what you see. Now, with Picasso putting in his background, I've read a lot about him. He was very much of a nonconformist, obviously. So, and I'm not disrespectful that he did some great things, but the other side of it is he just kind of bent the shape out of perspective and did a lot of things that were distorted because of the Dadaism approach he took to life. But that's fine. But I think from the point of view of working with a client, working with an architect or a product designer or an automobile manufacturer who has to begin to build something, you cannot take that chance by freewheeling something. He was an excellent painting and was classically trained. Yeah, terrific. Not at all. This was just a comment. Yeah, he was extremely gifted, a very talented guy. And then all of a sudden, to turn the corner, I think about 4 or 5 years into his career, he's turned the corner into a lot of surrealism, which is great. I mean, I respect what he's doing. But I think, to answer your initial question, Madness, is this. I would really prefer us to really understand, from this point of view, how perspective functions. So we can begin to use that as a tool to really open up our how it opens up our mind to create certain things. And again, back to Sid Mead, the whole point about his whole process of learning perspective was the following. Perspective is the genesis of illustration. And that's so true. And you can use that tool. His comment also was, if it ain't broke, break it. I mean, that's the way to do it. You can use that understanding. Now understand this very fully. I can begin to flatter that shape and move it around. So I hope that understands, answers your question. Yeah, I'm enjoying the conversation as well, Madness. I very much appreciate the time involved here. You haven't done it and we got so well. I'll tell you what, it's one of those situations where, as I said last week in my stream and wrapping it up, every day I draw discipline for about an hour, just go through the process of keeping it all fresh. And in working with you all, it's been really great because it keeps me on my toes in terms of if I'm going to go on the stream and talk about something, I better know what I'm doing. So I keep practicing, and I keep, even though I've yet to see the end yet, I'm still inspired by what's going on here. So let me go back to this just for a moment, and let's add one more on top of this, and let's keep going to this and show how extreme this can get. Let's extend this up. Let's extend this up. Let's take that same height and bring it forward again. Let's take that same height that we've established it right here, that one, bring it up again, and then go, and then right back. Look how much more drama you're going to get out of this form. Coming up, taking this back again, right back to vanishing point right, dropping that down. Let's extend that side up. Let's get that face, put that together. That comes up. And again, this back corner, draw through it as a transparency. Back to vanishing point left. Oh, pardon me here. Take that corner, right back to vanishing point right. Draw that through. Intersection, and look how they all begin to line up. That's the breakthrough clause about understanding perspective. When it all functions properly, and your eyes and your hand-eye coordination begins to all fall in place. Look how it begins to really develop an incredible scenario in terms of, man, it just all these lines fell into place because of the principles we're being following here. And let's do this. I think, let me stop here for a moment and put together a little action. If we keep the principles, then the principles will keep us. These are all principles of truth. They will keep us honest. And I think, how many times have you done something? I'll be the first to confess this. I've drawn something, boy, that doesn't look right. Doesn't feel right. Doesn't have the right kind of zap around it, or the same kind of inspiration or drama. It's not really snapping together. That's because I'm taking too many liberties and hoping that it works, rather than knowing that I'm going to develop something here that really kind of comes in nicely here. So again, all these things we've talked about is really putting together the idea of the principle of truth here. And let me just stop here, and I'm going to review things in a moment here. So far, so good on all this stuff, gang. There's a lot of information here. And again, as I started my stream today, I want to be very certain that when we talk about this, I'm going to slow it all down. Let's go through the method today to get the practice down, because there's a couple little complicated steps there that make a huge difference. We'll slow it all down, get the method down, and then next week we're going to come back in and do a lot of conceptual sketches based on two-point perspective and show how it all begins to function. And above all else, the goal here for all of us, including myself, is to understand this stuff like the back of our hand and begin to use it as a tool for newness and freshness. And above all else, to make it fun. I do not want this to become, these lessons become laborious and tedious. I hope I'm coming across all right as far as explaining these principles. I do not want to bore you. Let's see. Do you find those sometimes a drawing is awesome, but too free, and when you make it truth, it becomes less, more real, but less exact. Yeah, that's a good premise too, Madness. Yeah, you can be awesome and free, and then at the same time you make it truthful, it becomes less. I think the more honest a sketch is, the more truthful it is, the more powerful it is, because you can take those principles and really make it sing in terms of developing a shape or a round organic form. By cheating the shape, you can make that stronger. It doesn't become less. I think it becomes more powerful, and it sends a stronger signal that you understand your craft. I can see the principle you're getting at there, Madness, but I think the bottom line for anyone, I've worked with some of the greats, for example, Enzo Ferrari, individuals of that nature, Chuck Jordan, Bill Mitchell, Arkus Duntov, a lot of great design guys, John Hurwitz at Chrysler. They've all talked about that. Drawing becomes awesome because you understand the principles. And if you keep it truthful, it becomes much more powerful because you're not telling this, you're not really distorting, you're not trying to make it something it isn't. And I think that's the difference there. So that's the idea. I think that's a really interesting way to look at it. Yeah, can you go too far and be so cosmetic? Yeah. Let me answer it the other way too, Madness, so it doesn't distort the answer here. You can go to the place where it becomes so nice that it becomes static because of the perspective. But if you put a little touch of that twist into it, that understanding the principles and moving them around and beginning to manipulate them to create a greater flavor, man, more power to you. That's the difference. So great questions. I really appreciate the conversations here, gang. This is really cool. I'm going to go back with one little principle here very quickly here. Notice we've talked about, in closing, we've talked about taking that horizon line and opening up the vanishing point to really spread them out. I'm going to show you what happens, for example, if you don't do that. Watch what happens. If you begin to pinch, or what I refer to as collapse, the horizon line. Let's do a quick little sketch here. If you really collapse, let's get a horizon line down. Let's lay that in. Now, if I pick a vanishing point here, vanishing point left, and a vanishing point right, and begin to move them in. Vanishing point right, and put it there and there. Look at the difference between the span here. Look how much span I have, for example, in this sketch. I can move that out even more so. The more I move that out, the more believable that element's going to become. So here we go. The minute I begin to move them in, look what begins to happen. Let's do this. If I put a leading edge right here, I'll go very quickly here. I put a leading edge in, and I do this, and I strike it here, and I put that, get the height here, and I put the frames in place. And I come down the measuring line, and I begin to take that point right there back to my center vanishing point, like we've done here. And I begin to break that up right away. Take that drawing through it, and come back in through here, line angle, 45, split it, bring that through. See what happens here? Look how distorted that gets. That is no way, shape, or form. Look at that. That should be a little bit wider, because the reason that changes the character of this thing is because this is really so tight. It distorts this. Makes that look good, but notice even the ground plane doesn't look like it's a cube. It's more rectangular. That's the difference by moving these vanishing points in. Oh, one more thing too. Let's do this. I'll show you a very quick rapid form here. I had a lot of questions in workshops going through this. If I come back in through here, and I put a vanishing point there and there, vanishing point left, vanishing point right, and if I put something right out here, a lot of questions come up with, well, if I can measure, for example, here, and get that height and measure like this, and get that done, let's do this very quickly here. If I can measure this out on this side, why can't I measure on that side? Hey, Pixel, how you doing, Chief? Good to see you. Oh, let's see if I've got a, let's see, interesting. I'll go back and catch your question here, Madness. I work from home and I don't get enough one-on-one time with other designers. It's great to bounce thinking. Yeah, it is. It's good for you. I think that's great that you're involved in that piece, Madness. That's terrific. Hey, Dr. Pixel, how you doing, Chief? Welcome aboard. Now, it's not a great lesson as much as it is hopefully very, very fundamental, but I think some really good questions. The whole purpose of today's stream, slow it down, get into something that's really complicated, make sure you communicate well. Then next we're going to pick up the anthem and really start to do some sketch work where the chart all begins to function. But let's go back here. Subscribe to Tier 1A, very good. 2 months, that's great. Let's go back to this for a moment. The question I get all the time about this whole process here, if I can measure on this side of my leading edge, there's my leading edge, if I drop my measuring line down and I get that to measure, why can't I measure over here? Because notice, you're dealing with, look at the distortion you're going to get. It's going to be rectangular, and look at that. All of a sudden, look how that stretches a little bit. You can't measure on both sides. You measure on one side or the other. The only time you can do that is when you do this. Let's put another sketch up here. The only time you can measure on both sides of a cube, and I hate to say this, but I'm going to say it anyhow. I've got to be truthful, is when I come right down the middle and I put that leading edge right there. That means that that distance from there to there is equal to that distance from there to there. And that makes that cube, unfortunately, let's pick a height there. That makes that cube so static, it's not even funny. It's this to this. Measuring line, yeah, equal, equal. There it is, and there it is. There's nothing more, as far as I'm concerned, deflating than to have a cube drawn that you're looking at both sides equally. That's the only time you can measure on both sides. It's when that leading edge is right in the middle of your VP right and VP left. And it really flattens things. I'd rather take the drama of saying, oh, you know what's really cool about this stuff? Got it here. I'm going to take that line and really pinch it in. I'm going to take that line and open it up. Look how much more dramatic this is going to be. I come back in here and connect the dots. You tell me, gang, which is more interesting, that or that? Man, it's quiet. It's really, yikes. I don't want to belie the principle here. What I do want to do is reinforce the fact that it really becomes extremely critical. Madness, isn't this similar to the rule of thirds at the right? Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's a good point, Madness. That's right. But again, everybody get me here? Equal, equal. That's when you can measure on both sides. The minute you shift that leading edge to the right, or in this case, probably to the left or to the right, you have to measure on one side only, and then use visual acuity to get the other side to work properly here for you. So far, so good, gang? Really interesting. Let's do this. And the whole process here, when it's all said and done, what we're trying to move toward is this. Let me get rid of this. I'll close with this, and I'll go back and wrap it up here. When it's all said and done, what we're trying to do, we're going to move into next week, is this. Once that's established, now you can go back into the process by doing this. You see that drive line, you pick up a leading edge, you put the drive line in and collapse it, put that in and collapse it, come back and pick up a side, draw through that, pick up a side, draw through that, and just by visualizing certain things, look how that cube begins to look visually accurate. Does that make sense, gang? By the same token here, the idea behind getting all of this to work is to do the following. Draw through it, and visualize the strength of taking this back and taking that back, and then getting that, look how that begins to really begin to open up certain things. All of this, for example, let me start with that. Let me go back to my first page here. All of this begins to help us dictate this. This begins to dictate freehand at will and how to really develop shapes. I forget the correct term. Is that now? Like the grids and photos, if you have the focus crossing the points, it's more interesting than the eye like it in the verse. Yeah, that's right. That's same product. I forget the term too, Madness, but that's a great description. So once again, the reason we're doing all this, let's go back and review this thing here again today. This is where we started. I just want to make sure when we started last week, this is where we left off, for example, last week. We left off with 1 point perspective. And I really want to make a good issue out of this whole process here. We call this a facing plane, but the one distinction between 1 point and 2 point perspective is, again, by definition, that facing plane in a 1 point perspective, 1 point perspective is when the object or the objects we're looking at are parallel to our eyes. And we can tell that when we look at an object or something we're viewing, look at where the lines are. If that line is parallel to my eyes, this is the ground line here. If that's parallel to my eyes, that's 1 point perspective. However, in 2 point perspective, when you shift from that to this is now a 2 point perspective, and it does the following. Now, by definition, 2 point perspective is, simply put, when the object or the object you're looking at is at an angle to your eyes. We've just taken that whole box and rotated, cube and rotated it. So now look what happens. Here's my ground line here, parallel to that face. Look at the angle here and the angle here. It changes things. It rotates everything out of it. That's the distinction between 1 and 2. The next sketch I did was this. We went back from that into doing a simple little study, describing what the elements were like, put it together in format of what the VPs are, how the central vanishing point operates, where it is, special vanishing point, drive lines, inside cut line, leading edges, and so forth. All these elements begin to build a vocabulary for us to become much more powerful. Then we took that little demo sketch and began to create one down here using the same principles. How to develop a 2 point visually accurate cube by freehand. It just overwhelms me how simple it all becomes and how powerful it gets. And then the last thing we did was this. We took that same process and opened it up by doing the following. You come back in through here, and all of a sudden, same process, leading edge. And one thing I want to stress here for those of you who came in late, really interesting whole point, just really interesting. On that leading edge, I've always had questions asked of me in workshops. Again, sort of be redundant, but I think it's worthwhile repeating because it's a critical part of the creative process. I've always had questions like, for example, and ask me, does 2 point perspective have a central vanishing point? A lot of product guys, a lot of architects in interior space, I'm not criticizing them, they just haven't been schooled in it, and I'm not saying that I have all the answers, but SIDB was pretty good. So the point we're making is this, will you do shading, loving this end, I have to put my kids to bed. Yes, I do. I will be doing shading, Madness, it's coming down the line here as we go. But the point I want to get across here, does 2 point perspective have a central vanishing point? Absolutely. That's where you're standing. We draw the leading edge. How do we find it? By extending it up. And where it intersects that horizon line, that's where my central vanishing point is, and that's where I'm standing, and that's where my eyes are. So that's one point I want to get across here. And let me wrap it up by doing this and to address Madness's question here. We're putting together a book called Dynamics in Drawing. And it'll go through a whole series of principles, Madness. We're going to go through a series. We're revising it now. I have a tremendous talent working on it with me, I won't say his name, but I think you all know who it is. I really have a lot of respect for this gentleman's information and talent, and he's working with me on revising the book. I brought it up a couple of weeks ago, and that book, for everybody's benefit, is now being worked on. I'm revising some things, doing some new sketches. We're going to put that up on our website at drcontrast.com for purchase. It covers all this stuff that you're looking at here, and hopefully that'll be of some assistance to you. So for those of us, again, who tuned in today, I really sincerely appreciate your time. I've always really been a very firm believer of taking my time, taking our time, and working with you, that I greatly respect and appreciate. That I want to make sure that I'm communicating all right. Question to all of you: am I communicating clearly enough here to kind of move on next Monday with a nice sketch rendering set using two-point perspective and getting into some things that we've been talking about here? I'll be quiet here for a moment, let you respond. So once that's been established here, folks, I can't thank you enough for tuning in today. It's been a really interesting journey. The process today was to get into two-point perspective, more method than it has been aesthetic because of the complexity of the process. I want to make sure we clarify that. Next Monday, I'm going to come back and review a little bit. I'm going to take it a step further and really move into some things and doing some quick little, fast little form studies or sketches to show how it begins to function once we see how things are going. And let me say this too, in closing, remember this, that we're going through all of this in the mechanical side of life to understand and see how space operates. Why? Because the more we understand it, the more we can flatter it, the more we can adjust to it, the more we can use it to our advantage. It opens up the floodgates of creativity. It is not an impediment at all. I'll go back again to Sid Means' commentary, but perspective is the genesis of illustration. You cannot get by without it. So nonetheless, I hope all of you have a great day here. Please, any questions or concerns you might have, what you want me to draw or think about or put down on my stream, please drop me a note at my email address at jim@drcontrast.com. Be more than happy to respond to your information and when it comes in. And secondly, if you have an interest in any beginning drawing programs, I have my website. It's called drcontrast.com. You'll find a series of lessons there, 9 lessons of just basic drawing principles. It's called the Beginner Series. Hope that'll be of some assistance to you. And again, for those of you who tuned in today, I cannot thank you enough for the enjoyment of being able to converse back and forth with you on this very, very fascinating process of creativity. So I wish you have a great day, all the very best. And I will close with this because I think it's absolutely critical. Never forget to remember to dare to be great. Thanks very much, gang. Have a great day. And thank you. Bye-bye now.